This is the Tabernacle Podcast with John Vermillion and me, Britton Bishop. What's up, John?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I feel like I'm having a hot flash.
I know you came in, is it hot in here? Which usually I would agree with that question no matter.
Yeah.
But
we're in the basement, and it's usually cool, and I don't know. I mean, random places.
You would think the vent we cut into the ceiling right there.
Yeah. But the other day I was telling my wife I'm hot, and she goes, it's not hot in here. And when I walked into the lobby today, Tim, I said, man, it's hot. And it's like humid, it's stuffy in here. And
Right.
Tim is like, no, it's not. And he's in a sweatshirt, you know. And then I was reminded that my wife said, it's your hormones. I'm like, I'm a dude. She goes, you have hormones too. And then so began this fiasco of a conversation that I have menopause or whatever, 52 years old, got menopause. Anyways, on another note, somebody on staff, I don't want to say his name because we might throw punch him, but he was saying that he always skips the first 5 minutes of the podcast. What is that about?
I don't know, but if I knew who it was in normal conversations, I will skip the first 5 minutes of those conversations. So, because
that
I
is
bet
the best
you could
comeback.
open it up to guesses, and I bet I could guess first try.
Okay.
Skips the first 5 minutes.
Skips first 5 minutes.
Martin Rizzi.
Let's
go.
It was Martin Rizzi.
I knew it.
100%.
He's all business. He wants to get down to business.
Yeah,
so,
he just wants
hey, if anybody listened to the last episode, if you skip the first 5 minutes, you miss some gold with Larry Cade. He took us to DEFCON 4 in an instant.
Immediately.
Like, we just got here, Larry. Why are we already crying, man? I don't even really know you.
No doubt. He had me crying, man.
That was awesome.
It was awesome.
So,
but in that regard, because some people do, when we get to the end, they forget, let's do the stuff at the beginning.
Yeah.
You were saying we need more people if they're willing to subscribe
on YouTube.
On YouTube. Well, why is that? Can you explain?
Well, if you subscribe on YouTube, the goal would be to get to a certain amount of subscribers. And once we reach that number, which would be 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, we would get our own URL, which seems like not a big deal. But right now our URL is like random numbers and letters that YouTube has generated for us. Whereas in the future, if we get 1,000 subscribers, it will be youtube.com/The Tab Church.
Oh, nice.
But you don't get one of those until you have enough followers. And I know we have more than 1,000 people that go to our church, that listen to our services, that
no doubt.
listen to the podcast. If they would all just subscribe
on YouTube
and then make an account for their grandma and subscribe for her,
no doubt.
We'd be there.
Perfect. Yeah. And even if you don't let your kids on YouTube yet, make accounts for them too.
Yep.
Just so that it'll be there when they're ready.
Exactly.
So come on, Tab. Yep. Give us a hand.
Subscribe there. Also, if you listen on Spotify, we have video available on Spotify now. We're one of the few podcasts actually on Spotify. That's not even a crazy church over exaggeration. Some of the podcasts that I looked at for inspiration when we were building this secular podcasts. And they still don't, and maybe it's strategic, maybe we're doing it wrong, who knows, we probably are, but they don't have video on Spotify yet, and we offer full episode videos on Spotify as well, which pumps me up.
I haven't seen that yet.
Matthew Corey Hughes slayed that.
Lord Matthew Corey Hughes.
Absolutely.
He is a Scottish lord. That's a longer story, but we'll save it for him.
Well, maybe he could tell it on here.
Yeah, good change life story.
Yeah.
Matthew Hughes.
Yeah.
He shreds a guitar, he can sing.
Yep.
Husband to Victoria, gentleman, scholar, tech wizard, and you didn't know this, he's a Scottish lord, or laird as it's known. Yeah.
And if this podcast had a dad, it would be him.
There you go. So. Executive producer. Yeah, or something big.
And then what else do we're going to say it at the end anyways, but hey, shout out Dublin General Store.
Dublin General Store.
Best brat I've ever had.
Best brat I've ever had. You brought brats to Saturday night service last week for the rehearsal. And I had two. I'm not gonna lie. So if you were here on Saturday, if there was a particular Saturday night and you were like, man, John's a little sluggish, I had a brat and a half before the service. One of them was full of cheese, I think.
Potatoes and cheese.
There was potatoes in it?
Yeah.
But it was meat though,
level,
right?
Yeah,
it was meat with potatoes and cheese. But the one that got my attention had jalapeno.
Yep.
Whoa.
So good.
Next level.
Yep. So shout out Dublin General Store in Wellston.
Dublin General Store, the place for
No free
meats.
shout-outs.
No free shout-outs.
No free shout-outs.
But that's the place for meats.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Jerky, brats, you name it.
They got steak there?
Oh, yeah.
They got steaks?
Yep. All of it.
I wonder if they put jalapeno in steaks. Oh, you probably can't do that. That would. It's only in the sausage and the brat.
Yep.
Deal. Yep. Yeah. Now I'm hungry.
Sweet. Same. I was noticing, though, a lot of our sponsors that we're actually achieving are food-based, which is probably an issue, but we'll take it.
Yeah, we're going to have to get like a Planet Fitness. Nah, no, don't need it.
Pass.
Pass. Thanks, Planet Fitness. Keep running.
Yeah.
Keep running.
Absolutely.
Keep lifting. We're over here not sweating. Except for me, because I'm having a hot flash.
Well, sweet. Well, you want to get into this?
Let's do it.
Well, I figured today, for today's episode, we would knock out kind of the last installment of our DNA series. So that's something that people have been kind of journeying through. It's kind of been a long form series that we've been doing, but we've talked about how at the Tabernacle we allow the Holy Spirit to be the Holy Spirit. We talked about big rocks. We talked about changed lives. We talked about why we go after men.
Crackpots.
Yeah, crackpots. We covered a ton of it, and I think today this is a good little bow to put on top as we're going to spend some time just digging into the DNA piece of our church, which is a key DNA piece and one that was highly attractional to me when I was just looking at this church as a potential home, was this concept that we're going to challenge everyone to be Dominos. And so break that down a little bit before we jump in.
Absolutely. So the domino theory, as it's known, we're not talking about the geopolitical American, theory trying to prevent communism, right, in the 50s and 60s. This was inspired. I was actually listening to someone else doing a presentation, preaching, teaching, whatever you want to call it. It was a seminar here at the Tabernacle. Dwight Robertson was speaking, and he was talking about laborers and how all of us needed to be laborers. Now, that's based out of Matthew chapter 9, where Jesus gives the one and only prayer request we see in all four Gospels. He sees the crowds, he has compassion on them, and it says, he turned to his disciples and said, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send more workers into his harvest field." And I've heard that 1,000 times. My parents were missionaries. I grew up on the mission field. My wife and I were sports missionaries for a good decade. Used that 1,000 times. But then Dwight started talking about the how. And he talked about playing dominoes with his grandmother, I think. Or maybe his mom, and he was talking about how the most fun you can have with dominoes is not actually to play the game; it's to stack them up in a line and then knock one down and watch them go. And all of a sudden, a light bulb went off in my head, and I stopped listening. And I got out a piece of paper out of the back of my Bible, and I wrote a message purely based on that, a sermon based on that. And I've had the privilege to preach it all over the world. And literally all over the world, in Europe, in Asia, wherever I've been, this is one of the 4 that I would do if I had a 4 sermon weekend. So, the first place I preached it though was in the Tabernacle, and that became a DNA piece, and it also became one of the keys to why our church began to grow so rapidly. So a lot of scriptures coming at you fast and furious. First was that Matthew chapter 9. In Matthew chapter 28, Jesus tells us, "Go and make disciples of all nations." That's the mission. We're supposed to love God, love people, and make disciples. He says it again in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, that you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and all the ends of the earth. But most people, when they hear, "Hey, go and make a disciple, go and be my witness," they freak out. And they say, "Well, I can't do that." Well, Britton can do that because he's a big guy and he knows more verses than I do and he can preach, and that's not for me. Well, the key verse that unlocked that for me was Acts chapter 4, verse 13. And it's right near the beginning of the establishment of the church. And Peter and John are preaching in the same city that crucified Christ. And they're doing it with boldness, and people are being attracted to the gospel, and the church is growing. And the council, the very people that condemned Jesus to die, drag these guys before them, and they're questioning them, and they speak with boldness. And so it says in Acts 4:13, it says, "When they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated common men, they were astonished, and they recognized that they had been with Jesus." And so right there, jumped off the page to me that that's the qualification to be used by God to bring people to Christ. Because if you look at different translations, some of them will say ignorant, ordinary, unschooled, illiterate. In the ESV, it said common and uneducated. Is that the same in the CBD Bible?
Uneducated and untrained.
Uneducated and untrained.
Yeah.
But the key was I mean CSB. Sorry, what did I say? CBD.
Yeah.
Well, the key was they'd been with Jesus.
Yeah.
And so
Which I got a shameless plug. Sorry.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
July 25th to the 28th, Camp 22. Founders going to camp with a few other churches from the Traverse City area. You just heard the announcement this weekend. That's the theme verse.
4:13.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, because that concept of if we can get students in this generation to understand that it has nothing to do with anything other than the fact that you've been with Jesus.
Perfect.
And so that's the theme. So, hey, if you're a parent listening to this, you're like, man, I want my kid to hear about that, to learn about that. Send them to camp July 25th to the 28th, and we're going to talk about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I had no idea you guys were doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew about the camp.
Right.
I'm not that unplugged.
Yep.
But that concept's not just true for students.
Mm-hmm.
It's true for adults, because I run into adults all the time. They've been Christians their whole life, and they've never been a domino. So back to the domino thing. If you're not watching this, maybe you can imagine a bunch of dominoes set up in a line. Well, if at the end of that line is the cross, the end of that line is the moment someone gets saved, there's hundreds, maybe even thousands of potential domino moments that lead up to someone making a decision to receive Christ, to trust Christ with their life. And it's normally not one person that brings that person all the way down the domino chain.
Mm-hmm.
God uses different people at different times because God's in charge of this process. Another verse that, when we teach this in a long form is John chapter 6, verse 44, where Jesus is talking and he says, "No one can come to me unless my Father in heaven draws him first." I mean, think about that. That's a pretty unique and powerful statement.
Yeah.
So the implications, so whether you're Calvinist or Arminian or Calminian like I am, right, somewhere in between, I believe in the sovereignty of God and the free will of man, and I don't think they're in conflict. Jesus is saying for someone to even come to him, God has to draw him first. And so the implication of that is that God's drawing people, and I start looking around me, and I don't know who he's drawing and who he's not drawing, but there's more verses. In 2 Corinthians, I wrote it down here, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20. It says, "We are therefore Christ's ambassadors." We're his representatives, as though Christ is making his appeal through us. And so God's in charge of this process, the domino chain of people coming to him. But the individual dominoes are you and me. Mm-hmm. They're young and old. And the qualification, going back to 4:13, is these are people who have been with Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so hypothetically, just to see how this works, someone's born, they're not from a Christian home, they don't have any Christian influence whatsoever, except an estranged grandmother, right, who lives on the other side of the country. But it starts with her praying for her estranged grandchild that she's never even met. I'm making up this story, right? But she's praying and she's asking God, would you do something? I don't even know this child's name. I never, my kids moved away and I never got to even meet this child, so forth and so on. The kid lives in a godless part of the United States. Oh, let's say California. Not Northern California. I got friends there, right? Okay, but just wherever. When she's young, though, a domino invites this child to go to a summer camp, right? And it's a summer camp at a church. Well, for the first time, she hears about God, right? And her parents just let her go because they're glad to get her out of the house, right? When she comes home, they're like, no, we're not going to church. No, we're not interested in that. But the 6-year-old was at a camp, a little day camp, and that's where she first heard about Jesus. Fast forward to she's 15 years old, right? Some other kid invites her to go to youth group. It's at the one church in California, because in my mind, there's only one church out there, right? And so they invite her to go to youth group, right? Where the music is cool and a guy named Britton Bishop is speaking. And she's like, I didn't know dudes could come all the way from Michigan with a beard that size and have it be legal behind a mask or whatever it is, right? And there's something about you that she's enamored by, right? Well, someone else says, you can listen to this guy every week on the Tabernacle podcast. You see how I'm making this up, right? She starts listening. She's listening right now. We start talking about the gospel, and all of a sudden she hears, oh, it's that simple, how to receive Christ. So who gets the credit in that short, stupid story, right? Was it the praying grandmother? Was it the kid that invited her for the first time when she was 6 that kind of laid that foundation? Was it the person that invited her to hear Britton Bishop speak? Was it Britton Bishop?
Obviously. No, I'm kidding.
Or was it Benjamin Vermiglia over in the corner
Right.
producing the podcast that she was listening to and randomly made this, By the way, in the rest of the story, she went and found her grandmother and they ate pie together, right? So I know that's a cheese factor, but every person is the result, every Christian is the result of some sort of a domino chain of events and people that God orchestrated, but they were obedient. They gave God their yes. Some of them big ways, some of them small ways, some of them out front like you, some of them behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So in essence, that's the long version, or that's the short version of the domino DNA stuff.
Yeah. And I think too, there's some key characteristics to Domino's that I think we'll hit on today, because we spent some time over the past few weeks at the end of the semester with Foundry Student Ministries, just digging into what does it look like to go be a Domino in the everyday spaces and places, And there are some characteristics that Jesus shows us in his ministry and in his life and in his interactions with his disciples and with his followers, and even with people that are just showing up on accident and don't know why they're there, and Jesus changes everything for them.
Right.
But I think even within all that, I just think to my own story. And like when you tell that story of the girl, right, the made up girl, but it's like, man, there are so many instances along the way of Thor Burnside, right? That's
really his name? Thor?
100%.
Or wait, he's a he?
Yes.
Thor. Yeah. Okay.
Don't know where he's at now. I think he's getting married soon. But in 8th grade, he said, hey, do you want to go to this camp called Falls Creek? And I was like, yeah, sure. It's a week. I don't have to do any sweet. Yeah, man, I need friends. But then I'm like, wait a second. Well, we can't. It's an expensive camp. It's one of those church camps. So I send a little Facebook message, still have it on my phone, to the youth pastor of that church. Hey, don't know if I'll be able to come for this reason. Don't let that be a reason. So then, okay, now somebody gave to that church.
Domino.
Right. They gave money to send a kid to camp. I was that kid that got to go to camp. I go to camp. I hear the gospel presented for the first time. I am receptive to it to an extent, which I've told all this in my Change Life story, right? Then 8th grade ends, and I kind of dabble a little bit, go to church every now and then, whatever game I need to play. Everybody's heard the story. Go to college. Do the whole thing. Guy named John comes. Opposite direction domino.
Exactly.
No,
Opposite direction domino.
No, but so just
because those are real.
Right.
Not every domino falls towards Christ. Sometimes we can be a negative domino.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I feel your rebuke.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. No. Every single time. I mean, I got to work on not being a negative domino. You got to work on forgiveness. So, okay. So keep going. Yeah.
I am going to tell that story this summer at FCA camp.
I hope
know a lot of you out there.
Yeah.
But anyways, you just think through all those stories of, okay, 8th grade camp, Thor invites me, and then now I've went to church a few times, and then this girl in the quad invites me, named Erica, and I went because there's free, and by the grace of God, the person that made that food, who had no idea why they were cooking that food, but that was a huge attractional piece that got me to church.
Right.
And so I went to church for free food, and then I heard the gospel presented in a way that I've never heard it presented, with passion, and with, it sounded like this dude actually believed what he was saying, and gave my life to Christ, and then I meet this guy named Trey. And then he starts this process of discipleship, but that's not the end of it, right? And then I go and I meet some other mentors and some other people, and I go to a year-long or a summer-long training thing. And
it felt like a year.
Right, yeah. And I meet some other people through this summer training, and now I want to read the Bible. But this is this whole story of dominoes along the way. And when I look back and you say it like that, it's like, okay, so who gets the credit?
Right.
Well, I can tell you one thing, that none of that all happens the way it did if there's not a God that's drawing all this out, that's playing the long game, right? Yeah. And there's the flesh person in me that wants to see the immediate response, especially being in student ministry. It's really easy to get discouraged at times. I think that's something we talk about with our leaders at Foundry, is seeds planted is victory, right? Because what the 1st or 2nd Corinthians, it says, neither the one that plants nor the one who waters causes the growth, but only God.
Right.
And so just that whole concept of, as a student ministry, our goal is we're just going to plant a seed. And whether that grows here and that kid gives their life to Christ, follows Jesus like crazy, starts inviting their friends at school, and we see revival break out in Manistee and Buckley, praise God. Or that kid goes to college and makes a lot of mistakes, probably gets in trouble with the law, but then someday along the way ends up being a preacher in northern Michigan. Who's to say that that wasn't the way it needed to happen, right? Was that scholarship wasted on the 8th grader that didn't spend 9th through 12th grade doing that? And so I think that there's just some incredible pieces to domino stories. And if you're listening to this, man, one of the most powerful things I've ever done is I sat down and wrote all that down, because it's so easy to forget how faithful God is in those journeys. And we'll get into what it looks like to be a domino. But I think it's important too for the Christian listening to this to remember that you've been dominoed.
You've been dominoed. Yeah.
And once you see all those pieces put together, for me, it serves as an encouragement to want to get in the game and be a domino.
Right.
Right. See, I plugged both of those.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
there.
Oh, yeah.
But,
well. So if you look at the domino thing, and when I get a chance to teach it in a long form, usually what I do is I'll stack up the dominoes and I'll put the cross in the middle, because there's a whole bunch of dominoes that lead us to Christ. But then there's also a whole bunch of dominoes after Christ in our discipleship journey. And for someone like myself, I became a Christian at a pretty young age, but there still have been dominoes in my life. Dominoes that got me into ministry, dominoes that moved me along closer to be more and more Christ-like. And domino events, specifically when we're talking about dominoes, we're talking about people, but there can be domino events as well.
Yeah.
Like, and those you can really see God's hand working. But yours began, your story, with a guy named Thor, and the groundwork was laid. And I would say that student ministry isn't just about seeds, because not every kid goes to college and makes a whole bunch of mistakes. Student ministry, for some, it's the seed began to germinate, it began to grow, and so sometimes it's watering.
Yeah.
So both of those are happening, or nurturing, or whatever you do. I don't plant.
Yeah. No.
But I was thinking about, even when you were talking, something like this podcast. That's not a shameless plug. So our last podcast was an interview with Larry Cate. And a big part of his changed life story, remember, had to do with alcoholism and his own struggle with that. Well, randomly, as that podcast, the day that podcast was dropped, I decided to share it with a friend who has recently been in rehab, who is in the program, is trying to, rid himself of this addiction. And I just said, hey, man, this would be a good one to listen to. He hasn't listened to a lot of them. He's listened to some of our podcasts, the ones that interest him, but he was like, yeah, maybe I'll check that out. Well, so it just so happened, on that day, he had a horrible day. And actually left work. It was so bad. At the way he told me, he wanted to go straight to drink that day. But instead, on the way back from work, he popped in the podcast and was wrecked and encouraged and blessed and strengthened, and texted me, man, I needed that today. See, those just so happens. That's God being in charge, but it still takes us. And I'm not trying to slap myself on the back. I had no idea he was going to have a bad day, but I texted him that day a link, by the way, to the YouTube. Yeah. I didn't say subscribe. I should have. Yeah. But those are domino moments in someone's life. And I think we sell ourselves short. See, my pet peeve, or one of my pet peeves, when it comes to encouraging people in the church, whether they're students or adults, to share their faith, is what they think sharing their faith looks like. And so they immediately dismiss it. Well, somehow in the early 2000s, the mid 2000s, or the 2000 teens, whatever, the Tabernacle people started believing that they could be dominoes. Yeah. We had domino necklaces, domino tokens. I mean, we gave out dominoes when we talked about it. When you went through Merge, you got dominoes. But more important than that, people were living it. Yeah. And story after story of someone that came to Christ began with someone believing they could be a domino. Yeah. And so, I'm thinking about our campus in Manistee. I'm thinking about the ongoing growth here in Buckley. I'm thinking about the hope one day to have a third campus, maybe in Cadillac. It's going to be with dominoes. Yeah. With people that invite, with people, well, I'm getting ahead of the story because you and the students went off in a whole direction on what a domino looks like besides that. So go ahead.
For sure. And I think just there's some key scriptures that point to this. So the first one that comes to mind is in John 4, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay, see? So there's a quick one if you need to find it quickly. Preachers still use it sometimes. In John 4, I love the vernacular that's used here. Jesus is Jesus and the woman at the well, and he's going. Everybody, not everybody, I'm not going to say that, but a lot of people have heard this story. And I've read this a ton of times, and I've studied Scripture, and I've preached this sermon. But as I was teaching it to Foundry, this phrase stuck out to me in John chapter 4, verse 4. He had to travel through Samaria. And you start thinking about that, and you're like, Jesus didn't had to do anything, right? When you think about the Christ, the Son of God, Jesus didn't had to do anything, but there's an intentionality to this. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the property that Jacob had given his son Joseph. And then the whole thing unfolds, and Jesus meets this woman at noon, which is when no one else goes to the well, right? And this woman goes there for a purpose. And if you go read the story for yourself, she's outcast. She's a woman that's been with multiple men. She's had 5 husbands. The one you're with isn't yours, whatever. And Jesus encourages this woman, and he was intentional, and he took time to be with this individual. But because the key piece to that as well is he's tired. They just sent the disciples into town to get supplies, and they just got off this long journey. But he had to go through Samaria.
I've never saw that before.
And that's just like, whoa. And then you continue reading, and you see how Jesus' intentionality to be a domino and introduce this woman to the gospel and tell her, listen, this well you're drinking from, you're going to be thirsty again, but I've came to offer water that you'll never thirst again, and all of this incredible stuff. And then in verse 28, then the woman left her water jar, went into town, and told the people. I love that. Jesus had to go through Samaria. This whole conversation unfolds in the next 22 verses or so, and then in verse 28, then the woman left her water jar, went into town, and she told the people.
Yeah.
And then it continues, and then the people meet Jesus, and they say, it's no longer just because of what you've said, but there's an intentionality to that word had. That with the students, it was like, we've got to go here.
Yeah.
We've got to look at this word. We've got to look at this story through this lens that this wasn't an accident. This wasn't by chance. Jesus had to go through Samaria. And whenever you look at the cultural implications here of Jesus being a Jew and this woman being a Samaritan, and this is a racial tension that
it's a racial no.
Right.
Yeah.
Wars have been fought over these races, and she's a woman, he's a man, which in that time
there's a social no. Yeah.
She's an outcast woman that's had multiple husbands. He's a rabbi, so even associating with her could make him ceremonially unclean. But Jesus had to go through Samaria.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy to me, the intentionality that you see from Jesus, because he didn't have to. People came to him.
Yeah.
Thousands of people would sit down to listen to this dude preach. He
could have done the Jedi. You all come to me.
Right.
But he doesn't.
Yeah.
See, this is and I love that you're pointing out his intentionality, because there's another piece to it.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to steal your thunder.
Do your thing.
But so Jesus was a domino, and then she became a massive domino. And so there's so many people that, including myself, including you, there were tons of dominoes. I don't know what that was. Was that a mouse? What just happened?
Dude, I have no idea.
Benji's playing with a rubber duck over there.
The squeaker came out.
I couldn't stop.
Okay,
I'm sorry. I tried to keep it together.
I'm sorry to keep it together. Rubber ducky, you're the one. What, are you taking a bath over there?
No.
Okay, no, he's got a tiny little duck. It's an inside joke. Ask Vicky about the ducks. But
yeah, it's an inside joke.
So there's all these people in our lives that are dominoes, but then there are many people that come to Christ that then become dead ends. It doesn't, the domino chain is not supposed to end with you. It's supposed to continue. So what I love is Jesus is an intentional domino. He goes out of his way. He had to do it. Like you said, he's hot, he's tired, he's thirsty. Her life has changed. And so she goes and tells the people, and then she's just an ordinary woman. She's an outcast. See, we have people that go, well, I can't do it because of who I am,
right,
or what I've done, or because of the social structure.
Yeah.
Jesus broke all those barriers, so does she.
Yeah.
And in verse 29, he says, come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? Then they went out of town and were coming to him. So she impacts an entire town. She doesn't keep her mouth shut.
Yep.
I want to know where this lady between the well and telling the people to come and see Jesus, I want to know where she went to evangelism class.
Right.
Didn't she learn some Bible verses?
Right.
Didn't she go through Merge? Did she go to seminary? Did she even buy a Bible?
Right.
Let alone a really cool one like a Schuyler Bible? No, she did not. Immediately she goes and she's a domino.
Yeah.
And so again, but what was the key? She had been with Jesus.
Yeah.
She had that one-on-one intentional time with Christ at the well, and we're still talking about it over 2,000 years
100%.
later.
And I think, too, a key verse that comes to mind with that is that's often used as kind of like an apologetics platform. We talked about this a little bit this week as one that's used sometimes to beat people over the head with, but she is embodying 1 Peter 3 here, giving an answer for the hope that she has.
Yeah.
It's not about, this is what you're doing wrong. She's giving an answer for the hope that she has with gentleness and respect, I'm sure, but that's all it takes.
That's all it takes.
Why do you have hope? Because if she can have hope, can you imagine sitting in that crowd, right? Sometimes that's exactly what somebody needs to hear.
Yeah.
I'm encouraged by some of the stories you hear from people that come to our church and they're like, wait, that your staff did that? Oh, that guy? He does this? Well, then anybody can do it.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, I loved, we were in Cleveland and the lady's like, so what are you guys in town for? All of us are standing in the lobby, and I'm like, oh, well, we're here for a pastor's conference. And she's like, you guys are pastors? And then you turn around and you look and you're like, I'd probably ask the same question.
Yeah, we look like a bunch of ragamuffins, don't we?
But there's so much encouragement in normal people being normal, but still loving Jesus. And I think that, I don't know, I think of my own story, and it's like, yeah, the reason I didn't go to church is because Christians weren't normal. Be yourself, but give an answer for the hope that you have. Why?
For the hope that you have.
Exactly.
So it's almost unique to you. Why do you
100%.
choose to believe Christ? Why do you choose to go to church? Why do you choose to go to Foundry? Why do you choose to follow Jesus?
100%. Because I think even Larry Cade's story that we just heard about his battle with alcoholism and how God has brought him out of that, and I loved the idea that he brought to the table of true abundant life and all this stuff. That's the hope that he had at that time, and that's going to speak to people differently than you and I can. Because I know your story well enough to know that hasn't been a struggle of yours. And for the guy that hears you like, hey, this is why I have hope, and it's like, yeah, that's easy for you to say. Right? But then there's somebody out there that grew up in a pastor's home that was a missionary kid that's like, dude, I've heard all this. And you're like, hey, but this is why I'm still in it. And they're like, man, I needed to hear that.
Right.
And it cheapens the gospel to think that we're the reason it can move forward or not, or whether we can, what's the word I'm looking for here? It cheapens the gospel to think that we can take away from the power with our story, rather than just go talk about it. And that didn't come out clean, so I'm
No, I like what you said. So to the person who's saying, well, I'm the exception.
Yeah.
I can't share my story. I can't invite. God can't use me. You're saying you're cheapening the gospel.
Yeah.
I would say you're underestimating the power of God.
Yeah. That's a better way to say it.
But I don't know if it's better. It's just different. It's so technically you're disbelieving God and his spirit.
Yep. He
said he can use you. He wants your yes. He said in 2 Corinthians that you are his ambassador, and you're like, no, not me.
Yeah.
Oh, so then you're not saved? No, I'm saved. It's just I'm a real sucky ambassador. Oh, so the Spirit doesn't live in you? Well, I've been at the church long enough to know the moment you become saved, the Spirit lives in you. Okay, so Christ is in you, and you're an ambassador. It isn't that you can't be one, it's that you won't be one.
Yep.
That's essentially what it is. And when people start believing that, it isn't that it becomes our duty, it becomes fun.
100%.
It is fun to represent Christ and to, say, listen, this is the hope that I have. And, I'm not going to beat you over the head with it. But, man, if you want to hear about it, we invite you in on this journey with us.
And it's encouraging to you as a believer as well to see that God is still living and active in my life, because it's so easy for people that get saved or have that moment of surrender to Jesus, and then they just get in this routine and they just kind of, wash, rinse, repeat. I read my Bible 15 minutes in the morning. I raise my kids the right way, and we do all these things. We go to church on Sunday, we serve, but there's those aspects of taking a risk to go be a domino, because that's what it is. It's taking a risk. It's getting out of this religious apathy that is, I'm just going to get in routine, and I'm going to take a risk to go be a domino in a place that maybe people wouldn't expect it, right? I think about so many people that go to our church that people expect you and I to show up and probably tell them about Jesus. And to an extent, there's probably people that are disappointed that sometimes we don't, and we just want to talk about something else, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there's a risk involved with people that are just in the marketplace, right? The mechanics out there, the businessmen, the guys that are sitting at board tables, to sit down and say, I'm going to take a risk today. And there's something about that increases. It's kind of that we did a book study on here, The Barbarian Way, and it's kind of settling into that of like, you know what, man, I'm going to get in this, and there's something that brings this new, I don't know, it's like this instinct out of you that is this desire of like, it's like an adrenaline rush kind of, but not really like I don't know, my words are failing me today, but there's just this idea behind it that is getting uncomfortable the more you do it, and when you see God move through it, it's kind of like a spiritual high to an extent, but I don't want people to navigate by those.
Right.
I think you know what I'm trying to say, so just clean it up for me.
Yeah, well, I think what you're trying to say is it's fun.
Yeah.
And you take great joy when that happens.
Yeah.
It's great. There's great joy when you're doing what God told you to do and when you're living obedient and in those actual experiences.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I want to speak to just for a moment here is when we talk about being a domino, we're not just talking about sharing your faith, although that is part of it.
Right.
So I've got a friend, I'm not going to say his name, but he preaches all over the world. And one of the things I've heard him say more than once in his sermons that just breaks his heart is that 95, if these numbers aren't exact, then forgive me. I think the number is 90% of all Christians will never share their faith. And 95% will never pray with someone for them to receive Christ. And I've heard him use that statistic a ton. And I keep meaning to talk with him about it, but I haven't had the opportunity because he's older than me and you're not supposed to rebuke an older man harshly.
Right.
So let's just speak to that a minute. Let's think about that.
Yeah.
Is that such a bad thing? That now, this is why. Dominoes don't always speak the gospel to someone. Hey, did you know that you were dead in your trespasses and sin? But God showed up, sent his son on a mission to save us, and he died on a cross. So if you trust him, then you can believe in that. And would you like to become a Christian today? I'm ready to pray with you. That's what people were told when I grew up. That's what soul winning was. We're going to go door to door and we're going to tell people that story, the story of the gospel, and then we're going to lead a bunch of people to Christ. Now, I'm not saying that's bad, or that's a bad thing to do, but I am saying probably 90% of Christians are not gifted to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Probably 90% of them. And it negates how people actually do come to Christ. If there's someone inviting, if there's someone who's giving, if there's someone who's being a good friend, if there's someone that's praying, if God's using all these different dominoes in order to bring people to Christ, then that statistic sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like, to me, 90% of evangelism is not actually sharing the gospel verbally or preaching or something like that. About 90% of it is all these other important domino events.
Yeah.
And then the actual praying to receive Christ, whether I pray with someone or not, that's not the point. It's whether they prayed to receive Christ,
100%.
right? So what I want the listener, the viewers to get in this whole thing is being a domino can be an invitation. Being a domino can be being a great neighbor or a great coworker or someone on the basketball team that was just a little bit different. There's a girl from one of our rival schools that I'm talking soccer now. So I coach the Buckley soccer team. One of our rivals within the conference. There's a girl on another team that is a captain, and I've watched her play in both of our soccer games against her. She's a very good player, but there's something about her that's different. And I almost asked her last night after the game, after they beat us, but I didn't because it would have been inappropriate.
Right.
I'm 99% sure this girl is a Christian, and you can see it by the way she plays. And I know it because I'm a Christian, and this is what I want from my players as well, to play with excellence, to play hard, but to also be the first one to help someone up and to be a good sport and so forth and so on. So being a domino sometimes looks like that.
Yeah.
There's 1,000 and more ways in order to be a domino. As I've said before, if you go to a restaurant and you're praying a prayer over your meal, you better be the biggest tipper in that restaurant. Because Christians have gotten such a bad rap.
It's like the worst day of the week to work is Sunday afternoons.
Yeah, because the after church crowd is they're demanding
Mm-hmm.
and they're bad tippers.
Yeah.
Instead of being the easiest customers to have and the most generous tippers, right? All of these little things are different ways that we can be a domino.
100%. And I love too, because what you're hitting on is kind of that second piece that we dug into with the students, which was that Jesus was relational, right? It wasn't just these big Sermon on the Mount moments, but you see it with the woman in the well. And then the other story that we used was Jesus calling Levi. And you see this incredible moment where there's thousands of people gathered around, but Scripture says that Jesus sees Levi, a tax collector, a sinner, and he goes and he's like, "Hey, let's have dinner." And he goes and he sits at Levi's house, and there's this moment where it says in the text, it says that he was sitting with many tax collectors and sinners, and the Pharisees were watching, which is so creepy. Whenever you really think about it, because it's like they're in Levi's house. So these dudes all creeping through windows?
Yeah, I don't know.
To watch Jesus.
Or were they in there? I don't know. Yeah,
are they all just like, "Hey, we want to come, but we'll just stand there"?
Yeah, we're going to stand out the window and look at you with our funny hats.
And so, but Jesus eats with all of them, and he rebukes the Pharisees, and he says it's not the well who need a doctor, but it's the sick. But I think that there's this beautiful moment in this where Jesus, being a rabbi, Jesus being this religious leader, he sees Levi, sees him. It's a key piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he takes a risk of relationship. And he's like, I'm not just going to give him the one-off. Because here's the thing, too. I think sometimes the cop-out is, oh, well, I told them they didn't accept it, so I'm out. Rather than, this might be a journey. This person might need somebody to love them for a long time. To show them that they're not just a person with issues that needs fixed in the immediate, but they're somebody that probably just needs a stable relationship in their life. And you know what? I'm gonna get coffee with you every week at this time, or whatever that looks like. But Jesus sits down for this meal, and he's eating with Levi and them, and we talk. We just encourage the students. There's a relational aspect to being a domino, right? That's something we even talked about this last week at our staff meetings. We were talking about with counseling, right? That the key to being a good counselor is building that relationship with people. It's not just them coming in and us picking up the Bible and beating them over the head with it, and them knowing that, listen, I know the verses. I know what's wrong with you because I know what truth is. But rather, obviously these things are true, and there are truths in here that people need to hear, but it's how you say it. And sometimes it takes somebody with a relationship with this person,
right,
for them to be able to wade into that, because for you to trust, and there's so much that goes into building that relationship within that domino aspect. That, I mean, I think to my own story. One of my really close friends, he'll be in my wedding, is a guy named Dalton. Love Dalton to death. He's an incredible, incredible man of God. He's a father now. He's an engineer, and he's just, love the dude. And we became friends. I think I was a freshman and he was a sophomore. We became friends. We both played football. Dalton's he's the best athlete at our school. He won Mr. Oolaga like every year he was in high school. He was a 3-sport starter as a freshman. Football, basketball, baseball. Best athlete at the school. I'm a chubby 9th grader that can push people. But I'm pretty fun to hang out with. So we start hanging out. Dalton has his license, different stuff like that. So we're hanging out, and I'm an idiot, John. Like, that's just who I was in high school. I did the wrong things. I was always in the wrong place, hanging out with the wrong people. Dalton is a kid that loves Jesus. He's a part of the student ministry that we went to. He's leading an FCA. He's doing all this stuff, but for some reason he hung out with me. And there were times where it's like, my life's a mess, and then Dalton's still there. He would come hang out with all of us when we were being idiots. Not like parties or anything, but like we'd be go have like a video game tournament, and he'd be there. And there were so many other places and better groups of friends Dalton could have had. But he didn't let us drag him down, but he maintained who he was. And I remember year after year, saying, man, this dude's consistent. And he's one of the best dudes ever. He cared about us. He knew how to pick on us and all this stuff, but he cared about us. And I'll never forget my bachelor party. This will be a memory for the rest of my life. We're sitting down at the table. We're all studying our Bibles together, which maybe not your typical bachelor party, but as my brother said, me and my friends are the 12 disciples. And so we're sitting there hanging out, and he just pauses for a minute. He goes, man, I would have never thought. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, that I would be sitting at Britton Bishop's bachelor party, and he would be, let alone underlining in his Bible with a ruler.
You and me geeking out with the rulers. Yeah.
But it was just this moment where he got to see the return of a long obedience.
That's right.
I'm going to hang out with these idiots. I'm going to pick them up when they've probably been doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing. I'm going to make sure they get home safe.
Yeah.
And then it comes out later when I was in college, Dalton prayed for me for years that I would give my life to Christ. And then now he's gotten to see just God just do incredible things and work through me. But it's like, but he took a risk.
Yeah.
Of relationship.
He was intentional and relational with you.
Yeah.
And he may not even have realized he was an intentional domino.
100%.
Yeah.
And there were so many moments in my life where get to a crossroads. I'm trying to figure out what being a follower of Jesus is. And that thought would come to mind like, well, what would Dalton do right here?
Yeah.
What have I seen him do? And then you just and it's just like, well, that's who I've seen do it well, right? Because obviously people are like, well, what would Jesus do? And it's like, I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I can read the Bible and I can try, but I'm not going to be able to walk out on the water and get him out of the boat, right? But I've seen people do it in my life.
Yeah.
And there's that relational aspect to being a domino that was huge for me because the whole time I was trying not to trust Christians, Dalton was just giving me a reason to trust Christians. This whole time I'm growing up in the Bible Belt and I want to hate the church and I want to point out all its flaws and how they're all fake. I couldn't because there's this one dude that won't stop being real.
Mm.
And it's just like, but he didn't know he was doing that.
No,
and he would tell you that.
Yeah.
He was just being a dude that wanted friends that weren't weird.
Being a Christian dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you made me think of a story. Here's another, and by the way, when I preach this, and I've preached it at the Tab before, or I've done it in Merge, love to tell the stories. And some, if you've been through it, you've heard the stories.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite stories happened at the Big Ticket Music Festival. Now, the Big Ticket Music Festival, that is usually all Christians there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, back in the day, I was hitting all the festivals, right? But I'm at the Big Ticket Festival, and I'm one of the speakers, and my kids are there. And my brother-in-law and his kids were there, and they were watching some show, and I wasn't even interested in any of the bands. I was there to do a job and hang out backstage and whatever, Actually, there was one band there that I really want to see. But, yeah, so during the concert, there's a dude sitting, and when he stood up, $20 fell out of his pocket, like, just right there during the concert. Well, my daughter and my nephew saw it. And so this is my oldest child and my nephew Brock. So Isabel and Brock saw it, I think if I get the story right. And Brock picked up the money, tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Sir, you dropped your money." The dude was like overwhelmed. He was like, "Thank you so much." And he was like, "Oh man, you are what is your name?" And da 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 da. And you guys are the best. And they were like, "Okay." And he was like, "No, I want to give you," because he had some swag for his, apparently he was one of the artists.
Okay.
And he goes, "I got some swag, come backstage and, I want to give it to you," and he was like, "Don't worry, I'll get you backstage." And they're like, "We have backstage passes. Our dads are working here," right? So he's like, "Oh, even better." So they go backstage. It turns out the dude's a magician. And so he was in a little side tent at Big Ticket. So he wasn't a big artist, but he was an artist, and he gave a thing or gave him each something. And then, or maybe it was just Brock, I'm not sure. But then he met my brother-in-law, Pastor Chris Emery, and they just started talking, and he just went off about the integrity and the honesty and whatever of his son. And his son's like, "I'm going back out to watch the show." The guy got tears because he said to Chris, "That was my last $20. He goes, "I'm just up here and I'm only getting paid for what people buy of my stuff." And Christian magician, there's a bunch of people like, "That's the black arts. You can't use that for the Lord." And apparently he can, right? So they just talked for a long time and exchanged notes or whatever. You think, okay, well, that was a nice story of your kids caught doing something good. Not so much. It was about a year later, or maybe 6-7 months later, those same kids, our kids are on the student council at school. "Hey, we need to do something. We need to have an assembly," right? And so they go, "Hey, let's get that magician guy," because apparently that's his real gig, is going into public schools and doing a little magic show, and then talking about don't be a bully, don't do drugs, don't get pregnant, stay in school, all that kind of stuff. But hey, come over to the local church after, tonight, and then we're going to share the gospel. We're going to do a bigger magic trick, right? So the kids totally organized that. The dude wouldn't have come here except for that moment. So you follow the domino chain, right? Just a kid doing something well or right. He wasn't even intentional, but they were relational.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Your kid gave me that, when it was my last $20. Yeah, I'm there. So they set it up, whole deal. They go into the local school. He does the magic show. They invite him all to Foundry. It was Firehouse back then. He does a bigger magic show. The place is packed, right? And one of the kids gives his life to Christ. And we'll have to get him on here so he can share the whole story. I had coached that kid. Chris Emery had coached that kid. Our kids were friends with that kid. But it wasn't until the magician night that Dominique Krosky gave his life to Christ at the old Firehouse. Dominique today not only is a member of our church, married, has a kid, he's one of the Firehouse volunteers.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the dominoes. Those are just the dominoes we know. And it started like your friend Dalton with a kid just doing the right thing.
Yep.
I'm going to do the right thing. And it turned into a relationship that, and there were other kids that gave their life to Christ that night, but they were just ordinary, unschooled, at least in seminary.
Yeah.
They weren't soul winner guys. They got in positions where they could use their position to maybe be an influence on their school. And to me, that's way more important than being part of the 5% that prayed the prayer with somebody.
Yeah.
Because of all those kids that were there that night. Not to mention the dominoes that inspired that guy who loved magic so much that he wanted to figure out how to use it with his faith. And there had to be a preacher somewhere in his old Baptist church is like, well, we're going to let this one pass because you're going to use it for the Lord. As long as there ain't no Ouija board. Yeah. I don't know why Baptists talk that way, but I love them.
They do.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So sorry for that long story.
No,
but
it's all good.
To me, that gets me excited when I think about that because I get to see that guy almost every week. And it's like, wow, God, how did you get that guy here?
Yep.
That's amazing. Now he's being a domino in my kid's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so there's that relational aspect, and that was kind of that part two that we talked about with being a domino. And I think it's so important because it shows people that you're invested for the long run. And I think that so often, so many people's hurt that they have is because somebody blew in and blew out or whatever, and it was just like, I'll love you as long as you're doing the right things. But I think for somebody to see that I'm invested in you even when your life is a mess, and to wade through that with them, and then to get to celebrate those victories together, it's just a really sweet, cool thing that you get to be a part of. And so that was something that we talked about with the students, and then we challenged them. Man, what does that look like for you this summer? And we launched into this campaign called Reach One. Pick one person that you're just going to build a relationship with that doesn't know Jesus, or maybe they've came before but they're still unsure, or maybe you just know somebody at your school that you're like, you know what, man, this person needs somebody to love on them, and we're just going to reach one. And if every student, right, I stole it from your old youth pastor, right? If all of you reach one person, we'll double in size. And it's not about doubling in size, right? It's not about numbers. I love that I go to a church that doesn't, we care about it, but my job security isn't built on how many kids come to Foundry.
Right.
But it's changed lives.
That's right.
And if all of us can reach one person, how cool
Think
would
about
it
if
be?
adults would embrace that.
It'd be insane.
Just reach one.
Focus on one person.
Target one. Target them.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
With your time, with your energy, with your prayers, with your love, with your invitation, with your service, with your relationship.
Yeah.
Reach one.
Yep.
One a year.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen?
Be insane.
We would reach all of northern Michigan.
Yeah.
Multiplicatively.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's a word, but I made it up. That's called multiplication, but I added some others to that.
I liked it. I couldn't spell it, but I liked it.
Me neither.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what we challenge the students with, and that's where I think that we see this concept of you're intentional, you're relational, and then the third part that we talked about, and I think this is just one that was a good reminder for me, and then the kids got to hear about it, right? That's sometimes how student ministry sermons goes. It's like, this is what God needed to say to me this week, guys, and unfortunately, you get to hear me process it for 25 minutes.
Good. Therapy.
Is this idea that Jesus was interruptible.
Yeah.
And we see this moment with Jesus when the synagogue leader, Jairus, shows up and his daughter's dying, and he's like, hey, I need you to come. And there's this moment where Jesus, he says, okay, let's go. And they're going, and they're on the trail, and they're walking, and it says that the crowds are pressing in around him, and then Jesus stops. He says, who touched me? Right, and I challenge the kids always, the Bible's not boring, you are. Let's look at this story through three lenses. Okay, let's think about Jairus when Jesus stops. Pissed.
Yeah.
What are you doing, bro? My daughter is dying. We've got to go.
You're on a mission
This is our last ditch effort.
Yeah.
I just told my family I got this. We got to go. The disciples, right? Jesus, what do you mean, who touched you? There's people are pressing in all around us. Yeah, somebody touched you. But then you think about this woman that's been bleeding for 12 years.
And she was the one who reached out and touched
She
her.
reached out and he touched his robe. And now she's crawling away. Right? I think about whenever I'd go stay at my nanny and papa, she always made Texas sheet cake with pecans in it. It was so good. And it was always for dinner, but I'd always try to sneak some. And you can't sneak cake because you can't put it back.
Yeah, because you can
And then
see.
she'd come in and she'd be like, well, who did this? And chocolate's still in my mouth. And I'm like, well, I don't know who did. I don't know
You're
what
slinking.
happened. Right.
You're slinking
But
away.
you think about this woman, her clothes have got to be bloody.
Yeah.
Who touched me? And it says that she comes back and she's scared. And Jesus calls her daughter, which is the only time in all of the New Testament that Jesus uses that word. It's the only time. And you see, he's on a mission. That's what I'm telling the kids. He's doing the right thing, going to heal this man's daughter. But he knows he's Jesus. And there's a plan, and God is sovereign. He's going to move through all of this. And Jesus, spoiler alert, shows up. She's not dead. She's sleeping. Cool moment. All this stuff.
Even though she was dead.
Right.
Yeah.
But
He brought her back to life.
yeah, that's a bad way to say that, because people are like, wait, so Jesus just woke people up? They didn't actually heal. But
Yeah.
anyways, but he takes time with this woman.
Yeah.
12 years, dude.
He was interruptible.
Yeah.
He was on a different mission, and he got interrupted.
Yeah. And he took the time.
And he didn't see it as a bother.
No. And
Yeah.
the thing is, he knew she was healed. He could have kept going. She could have been healed, and life could have moved on.
Yeah. But there was more healing that had to happen.
Exactly.
She needed to be seen and
dignified.
feel and dignified and feel that compassion. And,
Yeah.
and her life was changed not just because she had a physical blessing.
Yeah.
It was also, there was something deeply spiritual that happened.
Yep.
And that the God of the universe called her daughter.
Yeah.
I can't explain it, but
Yeah.
I think that means she's saved.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
If she's in the family, she's a child of God.
Yep.
And because it was faith, right, that
Yeah.
saved her.
Yeah.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
That's now what it makes me think of is the fact that many times, so you had just said in the last little segment that if we would all reach one, and that's not just for students,
Mhm.
I'm throwing that challenge out to adults too. If we would all just reach one.
Mhm.
So wherever you are, right? I mean, you'll talk to men that are like, why aren't there more men in my fight club? Oh, yeah. Well, maybe either you're boring or you haven't decided to reach one.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe you've not really made it a fight club. Maybe it's just your little clique.
Mhm.
Or the dudes here are just about themselves. When fight clubs grow, it's because dudes go and invite people to fight club.
Yep.
If you're sitting in Foundry going, why hasn't, my Foundry group, I wish there were more kids my age. Okay, go meet them and invite them. Go reach one. Why hasn't my campus, after COVID, is it back to the, okay, well then go reach one. Go reach a new one.
Mhm.
Go reach one that used to be here and is sitting at home on Sunday in their jammies. It just
Yeah.
needs a little encouragement, right?
Mhm.
That's the whole reach one concept. So in my experience, there have been moments when I've been so focused on the one I'm trying to reach that I've missed those along the way.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and I'm saying more than sometimes, it feels like the majority of the time when I'm intentionally going after someone,
Mhm.
it's those around me that God is drawing.
Mm.
And if I'm interruptible, I think I've told this story before and I want to be careful, but I for years and years was being a domino with the woman that cut my hair.
Mhm.
And she was the one I was going to reach. And I was she kept moving up in the world to more and more expensive salons. I think she's at one now that I can't afford, so I don't see her anymore. But 100% was focus on reaching that one. Meanwhile, and again, to protect the innocent, I won't say the names, but there was a friend in Fight Club who had asked me to pray that his sister would come on Easter. And I said, okay. I pray a lot of people, but he was like, that's the one I'm supposed to reach, his half-sister.
Mhm.
And so he was praying that his half-sister would show up on Easter because he knew we were going to present the gospel. After Easter, he goes, hey, my sister came on Easter, and you'll never believe why. And I was like, why? And he goes, well, she wasn't going to come. She wasn't going to come at all. But then finally she goes, wait a second. Is the church you go to, is it called the Tabernacle in Buckley? And he said, yeah. And he goes, is your pastor, do they call him Johnny V? And he goes, yeah. And she goes, okay, I'll come. So she came on Easter, gave her life to Christ. And he's telling me this story. And I'm sitting there going, well, who's your sister? And he goes, well, she's a hairdresser. And for a second, I thought he meant the girl that cut my hair. It wasn't. It was her best friend who cut hair in the chair right next to her, who had been listening to our conversations for 10 years, who, when she got tears, this one got tears, because many times when, someone's cutting your hair, it turns into a therapy session if they know you're a pastor, right? Yeah. And so the one I was focused on wasn't the one God was drawing at that time. Right. He was drawing her best friend, right? Yeah. And so I got to meet her, and it was kind of crazy. Cool. So that's interruptible, and I didn't realize it was despite me, right? So now what that opened my eyes to is, yes, I want to reach one, but I also want to be aware that there's others around. Right. Here's another classic story, and this is, I hope this is attainable, but it serves our purpose. But this is not what I'm trying to say people have to do. So I'm in Gothenburg, Sweden, and it's a Saturday night, and I'm there on a missions trip. And we'd specifically gone into the city square to see if we could be intentional, build some relationships, and just with people. And we did it with a soccer ball, because we were a bunch of soccer players. It was a Christian soccer missions trip. And so we're juggling a soccer ball. That's where you keep the ball up in the air. Remember when I knocked that thing off your head, during the pandemic, of which will not be named, right? And so we're juggling a ball, and we're all in sports gear, and there's people that are hanging out with us. And so, hey, why are you in Gothenburg? And we obviously look like a team, and we start telling them, well, we're believers in Jesus, and we're here to play soccer and spread the good word and sow in the good seed, right? Yeah. Well, in about 10 minutes, a kid comes over to me and he goes, hey, man, we're talking to an atheist right over there. We need you. We need your ability to do apologetics and, defend the faith and da-da-da. So I got in this great convo with this atheist, right? And one of his best friends who was a Muslim. And we're having this great convo, just talking about Christ, and it's pretty intense between me and the guy. Not negative. I mean, it was super respectful. There was gentleness, but he was good. He knew why he wasn't a Christian. And, we had Bibles to give them and all this kind of stuff. And his buddy, the Muslim, said nothing. In fact, he looked like he was kind of glaring at me, but it looked kind of disinterested the entire conversation. And so this convo lasted about 20 minutes. And at the end of it, we said, hey, are you interested in this? And here's a book, here's like a New Testament. And the guy was like, no, I'm good. So we bounced. We stayed there another hour. We got some ice cream, we're hanging out, we're just talking to people. It wasn't pushy. It was just people were coming to us, right? About an hour later, guess who comes back? Muslim. And he's just kind of sidles up, and he's like, hey, I'm very, very interested in what you had to say. And he had a couple of really poignant questions about the Messiah. And he said, could I have one of those? Yeah, you can have one of these. And he hid it because he didn't want anyone to see that he had it. And we gave him some numbers and some contacts, and he wasn't ready to receive Christ at that moment, and we didn't push it. Right. But we were interruptible in the sense that during that convo with the atheist guy, I could see he's pretending not to listen, right? But he's dialed in, 100%. And so some of the seeds that I was throwing was not just at atheists; it was just in case this guy. I had no idea he was going to come back, though. But he was the one that God was after. And so, that happens all the time if we have eyes to see.
Yeah, and I think, too, of how many people just get in that mode, right, when I'm going to the store, right? There's some challenges that I laid out for a group of people one time I was speaking at a family camp. And I said, how many of you do self-checkout? And all these hands, it's like, man, what would it look like to go back to the old-fashioned way and actually talk to somebody?
Interesting.
And there's just those little moments in your life where you can...
Oh, you're killing me. I love self-checkout because I don't want to talk to people.
I hate it so much. I'm not getting paid to be here. Right? And nowadays, everybody does it, so the lines aren't even long for normal stuff. So, cheat code.
Wow.
Actually, I do the one usually where you just scan it and put it in the basket, and then at the end you just pay.
Does it count if I do self-checkout and then talk to the lady that's monitoring the self-checkout?
Yeah. Because I'm imagining, I can just imagine you at a self-checkout. It's probably... common.
You are 100% correct. Over 50% of the time at self-checkout, I need somebody to help. And no, it's not to verify my age, all right? Because I'm buying illegal goods. It's like, I don't, how do you dial in? It's like, what? I got to spell avocado? I'm making guac.
know there was
man.
a test.
I didn't know there was a test here.
But there's just those little moments though, where there's the opportunity to be interruptible, right? Like I think about one of our a mutual friend that we have, a guy from he's from the backwoods of Mississippi, is how he tells
Mississippi.
people.
Yeah.
But I remember I used to go eat meals with him when we were both in Denver for a summer, and incredible dude. He was there to mentor and disciple me, and he spent more time talking to the waitress than he did talking to me. But what I learned through that was, obviously he's being intentional with this, but I saw him lead multiple waitresses, and he's one of the 5%, right? This dude's a gifted communicator, incredible personality, all this. But just his simple thing he did every single time. Hey, miss, we're going to pray for our meal right here. Is there any way we can be praying for you? In Denver, sometimes people are like, F no.
Yeah.
And sometimes I start crying. Absolutely. Man, why'd you ask that? And then it's just this incredible moment. But so many people get into that mode of, well, I'm with this person and I can't be interrupted. And that's important work.
That's good.
But I'm going to be interruptible enough. And that taught me more than he could have done with words ever.
Yeah.
And I think too, like,
and sorry.
No, you're good.
Just to be clear, if you're listening to this and that's not you, you don't have to be that guy.
Right.
But chances are there's people that are watching or listening that you can do that. You're big personalities. And you'll interact. You know, I know some people, they'll go to a restaurant and they don't ever catch the waiter or waitress's name. I always ask for the waiter or waitress's name because I want to be relational. They're I'm a public person. They're going to know sooner or later when we pray that I'm a Christian. And so I want to make sure that I'm treating them like a person and look for those opportunities. So I can do what you're describing. But if that is not your personality at all, there's still other ways that you can do what you're describing.
100%. And the thing is, it's custom made, right? It's just like our discipleship thing, right? Disciples are custom made, right? How you be a Domino is custom made, because if every Domino looked like Britton, Bishop, and John Vermilia, there'd be a lot of people that stopped going to church, right?
I mean, thanks for saying
honest.
that.
I scare people away. I'm a big personality.
I hurt people. I have a sharp tongue.
And I'm the same. Like I'm annoying to an extent sometimes with people, and it's like, what is this? Leave me alone. But there's so many people that I would challenge the person listening, just spend some time and actually think about, what does this look like for me?
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't have to be one of the stories we've told, right? Maybe you have an awesome fishing boat and it's just inviting that guy out to go fishing. Maybe you need to work on your golf game and you need to invite some people to go play golf, right? I think that's
instead of your same buddies.
I think God just said that's what I need to do.
Whoa.
Yeah, I just heard him audibly.
Did you really?
Play more golf.
That was a moment?
Yeah.
Can we turn the fog machine on in here? Yeah.
Especially
but no.
with Bill Stone.
Yeah.
Get him saved.
Yeah.
100%. No, but it could be hunting, fishing. It could be some sort
Whatever
of activity
looks
that
like
you want. You got 2 tickets to the show, 2 tickets to the game, and it's like, yeah, you could pick this, but what if you pick someone else?
100%.
I love how it's about being intentional, being relational, and along the way, be interruptible.
Yep.
Let God be in charge of it. You don't have to hit anyone over the head with one of these.
Yeah.
You don't.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's probably better if you didn't.
Yeah.
Right? But in building that relationship, people will see something different. Mm-hmm. And when they see something different, that gives you the opportunity.
Yeah.
There was one time in my life, I was a coach in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I coached a group. It was a select soccer team. I was playing on the Charlotte Eagles Pro team, and that didn't pay the bills. Okay, back in the day, there was not in the USISL. There was no money in pro soccer in the United States, right? So I needed a gig, right? And so I was a teacher, but I was also a youth club coach in the off season, and I coached this one group of boys for like 3 years, and from like U11, U12, U13. Actually, I think I had them till they were U14. Well, there was a certain way that we coached. Mm-hmm. If you were with the Charlotte Eagles, there was a certain way. Now, not everyone on our youth team were Christians. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there were some. But just in interacting with the parents, interacting with the players, I'll never forget this one kid who was on our team. His father said, "Hey, I want to get together and do lunch with you sometime." I said, "Cool." We set up a date. He took me to lunch. Along the way, I suddenly realized this guy was loaded. Mm-hmm. I mean, God had blessed him. He wasn't a Christian, but he was wealthy. He had this, I won't even go into it. But we had dinner, and I could tell at the whole dinner. I mean, this is a guy I'd kind of known as one of the players or one of the fathers of he's a soccer dad.
Yeah.
But there's something bugging him. And we had the whole dinner. It was all small talk. It was very expensive dinner or lunch. And he's beating around the bush. And then finally I said, well, there's got to be a reason that I'm here. And to be honest, in the back of I'm not afraid to say this. I'm is this guy going to ask me to sell Amway? Because I was big in the 90s, man. And it's like, no. And by the way, I don't want to be a part of your multi-level marketing scheme, right? And I'm thinking, no, because this guy's actually wealthy and nobody in Amway is wealthy except the dude that invented it, right? Sorry, just bus chucked the Amway. But they need to be bus chucked for a second. Finally, he says what he was there to say, because I asked him. He said, John, he said, I've seen the way, that you and your wife, you don't have a whole lot. You have a small house, you got 2 kids, and you can barely pay your bills. I see the car that you drive. He goes, I've got a 10,000 square foot home. I said, I've got 3 cars, 2 kids, 4 dogs, 2 cats, and 2 birds, an in-ground pool, and more money that I can ever spend. He said, what do you have that I don't have? That's the only time I've been asked at that point blank. He said, what do you have that I don't have? And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, in there.
Mm-hmm.
I shared the gospel with him.
Hmm.
Now that's after he'd seen my life up close, or as close as you can, from a soccer dad perspective for about 2.5, 3 years.
Yep.
That's how we're supposed to live our lives with people.
Yeah.
Not to withhold it.
Right.
I wasn't trying to hide my faith, but he needed it spelled out.
Yeah.
So I spelled it out for him. He gave his life to Christ. He and his wife are still some of our closest friends from a distance. But what would it look like if we were all out there to reach one?
Yep.
Being, as you said, intentional and relational.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to come a time where either you're going to push the subject or they're just going to ask for it spelled out.
Yep.
What is it that you have that I don't have? Because whatever it is, I want it.
Yep.
So that requires us to be lovers of God and lovers of people. They need to see love oozing out of us.
Yeah.
And like you said, to be normal.
Yeah.
Just be normal.
Right.
But be a normal Christian. Well, what is a normal Christian? Passionate, intentional, relational, interruptible, on mission, gentle, respectful, honest, full of integrity. I've had people say, often it's in Fight Club, I would invite somebody or I would be a domino, but the guys at work, they see how much I fail.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I tell guys is if you fail, okay, you went off and you lost your temper, or you went off and you screwed up big time.
Mm-hmm.
They saw your sin. That's still a domino opportunity because you can either say, well, I suck and I'm a complete hypocrite, or you can say, hey, you know what? I lost my temper with you. That's not how the Lord Jesus would want me to act. Mm. And so I need you to forgive me because that was unacceptable. When you do it that way, now I believe you.
Mm-hmm.
See, we think that non-Christians, sorry, I'm going off on a rant here. We think that non-Christians expect us to be perfect. No, it's we that expect us to be perfect. And so then when we're not, which is all the time, then we become not just imperfect, but we become unusable for the kingdom. He wants to use our imperfections. It's an opportunity not to point to us, but to point to him when you screw up.
Exactly. And there's so many people like, well, I'm scared I'm going to be a hypocrite. You're only being a hypocrite as if you're hiding it.
Boom.
That's the only, we're going to sin.
Yes.
And the reason you're a hypocrite is because you're acting like you're not.
Yes. Right.
Don't be open with it. Well, that's what I did last week. But like you said, ask for forgiveness. What are you actively doing to try to kill that sin in your life, whatever that looks like? But don't let the fear of not being good enough stop you from what God might be trying to do in somebody else's life.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the thing too with being a domino, that there's so many, I had somebody ask me this one time, and it's one that's just stuck out to me. It just says, Jesus changed your life. Yeah. Radically. Why wouldn't you share that with other people?
Mm.
And he didn't say, why wouldn't you share that life with other people?
Yeah.
It's not just for me, sometimes it is, I'm going to go tell people about it. That's my gifting. That's what God has equipped me to do. But there's an aspect of sharing your life with other people that is opening the door. Let your dinner table be a place where people can come experience the love of Jesus, right?
Mm.
Let your backyard be a place this summer where people can come over and just know that this is what community looks like. right? Maybe there's a couple in your neighborhood that they're new to town. They just moved in. Maybe they're snowbirds. Say, hey, we're going to have a barbecue this weekend, right? And don't call it a barbecue if it's burgers and hot dogs. All right.
There's a Southern boy you coming out.
But hey, we're going to cook out. Would you want to come?
Yeah.
And just love on them.
Yeah.
Right. And I think too, we sometimes as Christians, we overcomplicate the process. We make it too much about ourselves and we make it not enough about Jesus.
That's right.
If Jesus actually changed your life, act like it and then share that life with other people.
And I would say, if you screw up, own it.
Yeah.
So I got another friend. I got some friends, but this dude's really working on his mouth because he's impressive when it comes to cussing, swearing, profanity, whatever you want to call it, right? And since he's been a Christian, he's got a new standard, and he'll still lose it, but whenever he refuses to take the Lord's name in vain. That's what offends him, right? And that's really has been his focus. Well, he was telling me he was at work and he completely lost his temper, and it shot out of his mouth. He took the Lord's name in vain. It was like, God, whatever. And the moment it came out of his mouth, he backed up. He looks up to heaven and he goes, "Sorry, Father." And the woman that was he wasn't swearing at her, but she heard it. She goes, "Who are you talking to?" And he was like, "My heavenly Father. I just offended him, and I asked his forgiveness," because there's a line.
Yeah.
And then he started telling her, "Listen, there's a difference between profanity and blasphemy, right?" And so it turned into an opportunity to share what he really believed, even though he brutally messed up in front of someone that wasn't a Christian. So he owned it.
Yeah. So I think that kind of wraps it up. I just think about, I've heard the stories.
Yeah.
Right. And when I came here, we have the history book, you sit down with the Larry Cades and it's like, man, God's not, I don't think he's done here yet.
No.
Not
he just
by
needs
a long
more people
shot.
To be Dominos.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I'm like, man, what would it look like if there was just this revitalization, maybe to use the church ghetto church ghetto word, this revival in people to say, you know what? God's not done yet. And if there's anything that the media has told us, that our world today has told us, that there's a lot of people that are looking for hope. And I think we have a church full of people that know what that hope is.
There's strength and hope in our community. And they're also looking for relationship.
Yeah. And so let's just let our lives be an answer for that. Let's go be intentional. Let's be relational. If we need to, let's be interruptible. And let's all just reach one. That's my idea. I don't know. Felt like a good idea with the students.
It's a great idea.
And I think it could be incredible what God could do in homes, in communities, in a church, in a region. And I think it could just be a really, really cool thing that makes me really excited when I think about it. And it makes me want to keep chasing after Jesus when I know that other people are in the fight with me and you don't feel like you're doing it alone. And so, yeah, and that's why I love this church. That's why I love that being a Domino is a part of our a DNA, and that it's something that if you're going to call yourself a member of the tabernacle, right, there's so many moments where sometimes it's healthy, sometimes it's unhealthy, of what does it look like to belong to this family, right? And I remember for the bishops, there were some things that we did that we were tough kids, we were big, we were all that stuff, right? But I think if you're going to be a part of the tabernacle family, if you're going to call yourself a part of this family, you're going to be a Domino.
You're going to be a Domino.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whatever that looks like for you.
That's how you're going to live your life.
Yep.
And people might see it. It might be behind the scenes.
Yeah.
It might be on the down low. But God's going to use it, and
Absolutely.
God's going to draw people to himself.
Yep.
So you could be right now at the Dublin General Store, and you could be a Domino. You could be on
brats.
the way to Dublin
yeah.
General Store to buy some brats, get the jalapeno,
Yeah.
to drop off, I don't know, at T1
Yeah.
or in Manistee.
I heard the Italian ones are good.
The Italian ones?
Dude, they had some that I'm sure they're great because I've had the ones, but they had like a blueberry one? Some crazy stuff going
Blueberry
on.
inside of a brat?
It's like 30 different brats.
I would try it, but see, I like brats and I love brats and I love blueberries. Maybe those all.
Dude, maybe
that's a love fest.
They have a jerky wall there that is longer than the distance I've ran total in my life. It's insanity. All the jerkies.
All the jerkies.
Name it, they got it.
Are they just Northern Michigan meats? Or are they all kinds of meats?
Well-
like, do they import meats to make jerky out of?
No, it's Northern Michigan Meats.
Okay.
But there is one that I think is attached to the family somehow in Grand Rapids, where
Nice.
he's got like kangaroo and random crap
I
like
don't
that.
even know kangaroo.
Same. I like a
They'll
good
throat punch you.
Yeah.
No.
So they got summer sausage, snack sticks, and rumor has it, I've talked to some tradesmen around the Wellston area that says that's the best spot to stop for a hot lunch.
Hot lunch.
Yeah,
There you
chicken
go.
strips, different stuff like that.
So the Dublin General Store in Wellston.
Can't beat it.
Yeah. I might have to take a trip.
Yeah.
Maybe tomorrow. It's my day off.
Yeah,
I'm thinking
can't
about
beat
it.
it.
Need
It'd be
some
crazy
meats.
if there was somebody in that area that you knew that on your day off, maybe you and your son Benji could go shoot a turkey,
Oh,
and then after you killed that turkey, maybe get some lunch near their home.
that might be amazing.
Yeah, I think there's a guy out there that lives near there.
Is he a gas man?
Yeah, he's a gas man.
Okay. I'll try to think of his name.
Yeah, I think it rhymes with Colbringold. Yeah.
Are those his initials?
Yeah, and I think he works for something that rhymes with Fisher Propane. So
Oh,
if you
maybe.
See, if
Yeah.
you see a goofy dude.
Was that a Fisher Propane shout out?
Yeah.
No free
Might have
shout outs,
been.
Fisher
No free
Propane.
shout outs.
Yeah.
No free shout outs, but sweet. Well, thanks, John. Benj,
Thank you.
anything you want?
I probably shouldn't say that. Just okay. Don't forget to subscribe.
Yep.
And like.
Boom.
And hit the bell icon.
Hit the bell icon.
Just click it.
Click it. You don't have to smash it.
You don't have to slap it.
Don't have to
You
slap
You don't
it.
have to slap it.
Yeah.
You don't have to poke it.
Just push it.
Just click the
Just
button.
push the button. Yeah.
Well
Sweet.
said. Well
So you
said.
get
Love it.
notified
When new
every
episodes.
time we publish.
Yeah. Awesome. Sweet. Well, Benji, thank you. John, thank you. And until next time, Tab family, this is The Squad signing off.